Thanks for showing up. Thanks for being here. Thanks for tuning in. Yes, so there is a plan to be back in the space near the end of the month. That email that went out a week or so ago. So our fingers are crossed, our toes are crossed, that we can actually go through that and not have the back and forth. And the way that things are moving, feeling pretty hopeful about that. Things will still be distanced and things will continually be in some sort of flux as we get settled to being back in the space, but look forward to that near the end of March. And today, as we explore some movement, we'll be playing with some strength building around your hips, a little bit of flexibility in the hips, but just to build some support around your pelvis and to help support and cradle that all important center of your body. So make yourself comfortable for a moment. Find a seat that works. You can sit however you like. And go ahead and bring your hands into the center of your heart. Let your inhale drop deep into your lungs. Ooh. Let your hands start to drop away. And then you're on your way to your back. So as you get settled, you can lie on your back with your feet about as wide as your mat and your knees bent. Props in range so that you can grab them without having to roll around too much. And when you get down there with your feet to the floor, you notice if it feels like you've got to hold anything or control anything, and see if you can let go of that, relinquish that. Feel the natural shape in your spine. So for me, I can feel my baby toe and my fourth toe kind of off the mat, and that's a good distance for me. And then think about your knees being vertical so that they really are moving up to the ceiling without dropping in or falling out. So find that tiny bit of muscle life to keep that in place. And you can even take your hands around the muscles of your hips and just feel that when you drop in, might feel like your outer hips are not doing anything, or when you open out, it feels like you might feel more of a stretch to the inside. And go for neither of those. Go for a sense of ease, and then let your pelvis feel heavier. And then pay attention to your baby toe and your big toe and see if you can feel both of those surfaces connecting to the ground. Again, without gripping or pushing or feeling like you've got a hold on. Place your hand on your left thigh just as a reference, and then let your right knee start to move toward your left thigh so you can feel how you're using the muscle on the inside of your right leg to draw in. Notice if anything else got tight around your shoulders, and you just get to the point where you can feel the muscle on the inside of your right leg drawing your right leg in. But if your pinky toe came off the mat, you went too far. And then draw your right leg back up to what feels like vertical. You can use your right hand against your right thigh for reference. And then start to draw your left knee into your midline. And just turn on the inner side of your left leg and let some action pull your leg into that space. Notice if your right knee wanted to get away from that, right? And then draw that back up to neutral. So you can keep using a hand as a reference, or you might rest your hands on your belly. Your right knee will come into your midline. Keep your baby toe down. Second time around, you might find more movement, more range. And then you come back up. And then you draw in with your left knee. Feel as though you're almost pressing your left knee, maybe your hip, toward the front of your mat when you do that. That changes the sensation. And then your right knee draws in. And watch out for kind of rolling to the left as you do that, to keep the rest of your body as in the middle as possible. And then again with your left knee, resist any desire to fidget your feet. So really see if they can stay where they are. And then one more time with your right knee coming in. And once it's in, I want you to stay there. So your left knee is vertical, your right knee is crossed in, and you're just hanging out there. So there you can feel the muscle action of drawing your leg into that space. You can feel some subtle muscle action in your left leg, keeping your left leg in place. And then you might start to feel something kind of interesting, maybe warm around your right hip in that moment. As long as it doesn't turn into a pinch or a cramp, stay with it. And then come back and release. Let your right knee feel vertical. And then feel what's happening at your right hip. Should feel pretty, like almost like the air got let out of it. And then take your left knee toward your midline. And then you find that place where you can just hang out. And the two sides might feel pretty different, but drawing your inner hip flexors into action, keeping your right knee vertical. And then you start to feel the sensation around your left hip, almost like your sitting bone is trying to tip away from your midline in that moment and draw out. It won't necessarily, right? Go one last breath there. And then release that. You can narrow your feet a little bit. Let your feet come closer. Let your thighs open out a little bit away from your midline. And then bring them back in toward each other. So just like this little open wave touching your knees. While you're doing that, find your block. And then you're going to take the block between your knees. So you can kind of feel where it connects the most naturally. If it's right against the knee joint, it might not feel okay, depending on how bony the medial side of your knee is. But if you can get it high up into the knee, that's great. And then take your feet wide again, so about as wide as your mat, and walk them forward a smidge. And you're just holding on to the block with your knees narrow, and there's enough action, enough squeeze that you can feel a little bit of warmth and awakeness around your hips. Then allow yourself to squeeze just a little bit more, press into your feet, and lift your hips off the ground. And when that's happening, feel what the backside of your hips, your bum just did. So notice if you got all squeezy in your butt and see if you can let go of some of that squeeze, right? Especially toward the top. If you go down toward the bottom of your bum, you'll feel some more action. And then see if you can lift up a little bit more. You might feel some firmness in your bum, but it shouldn't feel like it's gripping. And you're just floating here, finding that inward action, finding a little bit of response at your butt. And then you can lift your pelvis a little bit more, but notice if you curled your tailbone in to do it, and see if you can release some of that curl. There's still some softness in the front of your hip. All the while you're keeping some pressure against the block. Give yourself one more moment, or if you got really tense at your butt, come down, release, come back up. And then slowly come on down. Take the block out for a moment. You can rest it on your belly. Let your knees open up some just to a natural place. Feel what you feel around your pelvis. And then you're going to do that one more time. So take the block into that same space and move your feet back a centimeter or so. It's going to change where you can press. Press into the block, press into the floor. Try not to curl your tailbone to lift up, and then lift. Check what's going on in the big glutes and see if you can let go of any extra curl and tuck. She didn't even wait for Shavasana today. Drawing in. So if you can, and it doesn't create any unpleasantness in your hip joint, you can press the block stronger once you get to your lift. So you're focusing on your inner hip flexors, not on your glutes, not on your butt muscles, not on the big action movers of your glute max. Give yourself one more breath right here. And then release that down. Take the block away and stretch out your legs for a moment. Feel your pelvis, feel its weight. Feel what happens to the blood flow down your legs. And then give yourself one more exhale. Good. And then bend your knees one last time here with the block. Take the block in between your knees and lift your feet off the mat. All right. So I'm going to turn this way just for a moment so that you can kind of see. So I'm thinking about my feet in line with my knees as much as possible. And then I'm going to keep some pressure against the block, and I'm going to swing my left foot away from the midline. I'm trying to keep my right foot from moving, and I bring it back and in. And then I move my right foot away from the midline, and I move it back and in. So my left foot wants to move, and my right foot is trying to get out. So I can use my fingers on the edge of my right leg when I swing open my left foot, and then I come back in. I can use my left fingers on my left shin and open my right foot away from the midline. So having this internal rotation in your leg, keep switching sides and feeling how that internal rotation translates into your hip muscle, right? So when I internally rotate my left thigh bone, I can feel how the inner hip flexor is working, but I can also feel what's happening on my outer hip. And then I can rotate my right foot out so that rotates my right thigh in its socket internally. And I can feel, if you touch your inner thigh, it firmed up. And then you bring it back. And then your left foot moves off the midline and back in. And then your right foot moves off the midline. But notice if you're going up or down in that process. So see if you can keep your foot at the same height and move out. So you're not necessarily flexing or pointing your foot when you do this. You might feel some change on the outer and inner ankle. So when I move my left foot out to the left, I can feel my outer ankle shortening a little bit. So there's a little E version of my ankle. And when I go out to the right, I can use some of that E version shortening of the ankle on the outside to help it open. It doesn't have to happen, but it can. And if you're like me, you can tell the difference between the two sides, right? One leg cooperates with this much more than the other. Last couple in each direction. One more for each side. It gets hot right at your hip crease there. Good, and then take the block out, move it away, drop your feet. Let your legs stretch out. So you might notice your inner thighs kind of taking a sigh of relief, but also the front of your hip there, right? Because you were in such deep flexion at your hip that your hip flexor is kind of going, thank you for stretching your legs out. Windshield wiper your feet a couple times. And then if you have a TheraBand, you can grab your TheraBand. Hopefully there's a loop in it already. Right? So you can also slip a belt there and slip it around my feet and bring it up to my knees. Right? So it frames my thighs. And the nice thing about the TheraBand is I can be on the ground with my knees about hip distance apart. And I can just press out into it ever so slightly. And because there's some resistance there, I can feel my muscles trying to figure out which way to jostle. So I'm just pressing out into whatever it is, TheraBand or strap, enough that there's a action, right? Not that there is a strong reaction, but I can really feel the reflexes of my muscles trying to figure out what to do. Right? So you can be there, especially if you're using a strap. But if you've got more of a stretchy, therabandy kind of feeling, you can start to open your knees wide so the soles of your feet come together. So you're pressing more action, more energetically out into the strap there and keeping that resistance. I'm working my outer hip by pressing into the strap or pressing into the TheraBand, and my inner leg is still trying to jostle. So there might be some kind of wobbliness or tremoring along the way. Giving yourself a moment here. So if you touch your outer hips right around the sides of your bum, you'll feel the muscles there, right? You'll also, if you reach down and kind of touch the backside of your bum, you can feel the muscle there. You can keep it static right here or press into the pinky edges of your feet. Keep your knees wide and lift your tush off the ground, not very far. And then you come back down. And then you can press into that and lift. So notice if you're squeezing to lift, things will be firm back there, but not squeezed and pinched. And then you lift. And the more you can press into your shoulders when you're lifting, the less you have to squeeze your butt, I find. Right? So I can soften up, try to find some softness, press into my shoulders as I press into my feet. And then there's still some action, but it doesn't feel as aggressive. And then back down. And then when you lift this time, stay up and play with the tilting of your pelvis. So if you really let your pelvis tilt forward, so you kind of tuck into yourself, that's where your butt muscles get really engaged and maybe a little bit angry. And then if you do the opposite, you let your pubic bone tip down toward your tail, you can have a little bit more softness with that action. And there can be some heat that's showing up around your piriformis, around your lateral glutes. Floating here for 2 more breaths. Good, and then soften and lower. Let your feet come flat to the mat. And if you widen your feet and narrow your knees, you'll take the action out of that. And then you just kind of waddle your hips side to side on the ground, kind of rubbing your knees together. Stretch out your legs for a sec there and keep the strap or the TheraBand as is. It just holds on to your legs. And give yourself one more breath. Good. And then rebend your knees so the strap or the TheraBand is still where you had it before. And then you're going to draw your right knee up. So your right knee is vertical. And we did this one recently with your hand. You can press your hand against your thigh, and that can be the action too. So you're creating some resistance with your hand against your thigh. If you've got something stretchy, well, if you have a belt, you can stay right there. If you have something stretchy, you're going to pull that 1 centimeter closer, and then slow motion, bring your right leg back down. Then practice that on the other side. So you just draw your left leg vertical, and you can press your hand against your thigh there. You can use the tightening of the belt to create some resistance. Draw it in 1 more centimeter, and then slow motion to the ground. And then it can change. So you can do what you were already doing, or when you bring your right knee up, it comes up not fast, but faster. And then slow motion, your right foot goes back down to the ground. And then at a quicker pace, your left knee comes up. So you're not really working against anything. and then you slow motion on the way back down. A little quicker with your right leg, it comes up. So you can use the momentum to get there, and then it slowly returns, slowly returns, slowly returns. Use the momentum to draw your left knee up, and then slowly, 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 your left foot returns. One more time. So momentum with your right thigh, and then slowly, 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 slowly down. Momentum with the left thigh, and then slowly, 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 and slowly down. And then we'll reverse those two actions. So now it's slow. You bring your right knee up. So the slower pace means that your hip flexor has to work more on the way up, and then you let it come down. Slow pace with your left leg coming up. And then you let it step down. Right leg slow, 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 slow. And then it can come down. And left leg, same way, slow. And really, if you were doing this with no strap and no belt, you would still have some experience of it because, and then back down, slow up, because the slower pace means that the muscles have to figure out, well, what are you doing? And then step down, slow up with the left side. So even without the aid of a prop, it can be interesting. And then back down. One more time, slow up with your right leg. And then step down, and then slow up with your left leg. And step down. Good. You can take the strap away and stretch out your legs. And feel what you feel. You can windshield wiper your feet a couple times. Breathing where you are. Good. And then bend your knees so you can roll to your side. Come on up to sit. And if you have a sandbag, or you can use a couple of blankets, you can bring that in. So I'm going to set myself up in sort of a 90-90 seat. So my shin goes across the longer edge of my mat, and that just means that my ankle and my knee get to have some padding there. And I'm going to place a sandbag over my thigh. So you could place a couple of blankets over your thigh. That just creates some weight there so that this leg really feels connected to the ground, because it's the leg that's going to want to move around a whole bunch. And then I'm going to lean forward so that I can get my right knee heavier into the ground a little bit. Then I'm going to take both hands over to the right side. So I'm in this little twist where I can feel my right hip, my right thigh, my right shin, and my right ankle really against the ground. And then I'm going to point my right ankle. And when I get there, I'm going to see, and there's a very good chance that nothing will happen. I'm going to see if I can try to get my right foot off the ground. And it doesn't, right? But just the thought of trying to get it up turns on muscle. So I'm trying to get my right foot up, but it's not going anywhere. And you can see that I kind of lift all the toes off, and I start to shorten at the ankle. And then I think, oh, can I lift my leg? And nothing happens. But if you put your hand on your inner right thigh when you're doing that, you'll feel right from where your knee crease is all the way up the inside of your thigh, everything's firing, right? Doesn't seem like anything's happening, but everything's firing. You turn it on, and then you release it. Then you can lean over and you try to get your foot up. Think about your ankle, nothing happening. Last couple times like that. Nothing. But that sensation is real on your inner thigh. And you can feel how your left knee wants to press even more into the ground to try to help. One last lift, or attempt at lift. Good. And then switch that over to the other side so that your left shin goes across the long edge. You can weight down your right leg. Walk your hands over to your left. So it just puts more weight over to the left, and so that there's less weight on your left ankle. And then you think about it, right? So you can already put your right hand on your inner right thigh, and you think, oh, if I can get the toes up, can I get my foot up? No. Toes up, can I get my foot up? No. And I'll tell you, like, I don't know anybody who could pick up their foot in this situation, but you can turn on the muscle, right? If your foot's coming off the ground, we need to talk, right? Something's not in the right place, right? And then you're firing the muscles there. You're trying to get your foot up, nothing. But everything's alive inside your inner thigh. All those hip flexors are turning on. And then you drop. And you press. A few more times. Toes up. Can the leg? No. Notice if you grip in your butt muscles, especially around the right hip, to try to make something happen. One more time. Good. And then take the sandbag away, switch your legs around. So back to that initial 90-90. But this time I'm going to put the sandbag on my right thigh. So my right leg is the one that's in front of me. And I'm still going to move my hands over to the right. So now there's even more weight to the right. And now my focus is on my left ankle. So I can look back at my left ankle and try to lift. And when I say lift, my left ankle is still on the ground, but my left big toe, like the bunion, that rolls up off the mat. And then I put that down. And then I roll the bunion off the ground. So I'm taking my foot as if it's like a Geiger counter and I'm turning it. And that's going to anchor my knee into the ground even more. I'm going to do that one more time. So I'm just thinking about the big toe edge of my foot coming off the ground, and I put it down. And then this time, I'm going to lean into my hands forward some, so my left knee can get heavier, and then my whole left foot can come off the mat now. And then I put it down. And then my whole left foot comes off the ground. All without any twisting or turning in the ankle. No real flexion, right? So just lifting it up. So keep your left knee on the mat and lift your ankle off. And if you put your left hand right where your pocket might be on your left leg, that's where the life is, right? You feel that turning on there, Leah? Right? So right there at your TFL. And then you let it come up. And then you let it come down. One more time, you let it come up. And you let it come down. Good. And then switch that around. And you might feel right away when you put your left shin down in front, that spot where the pocket was turned on, that kind of goes, right? Hopefully. And then there's some weight on your left thigh. It's not required, right? You don't need to have anything there. And then I'm going to think solely about my right foot for a moment. So I think about the big toe edge, bunion, and I'm going to turn that up so that the rotation is happening from my knee down to my foot. So there's some external rotation in my lower leg, turning and then lowering. And you could, if you can reach, you can kind of reach for your shin bone and feel it turn a little bit as your foot comes up. Feeling that rotation. The little band of connective tissue right at the crease of your knee, where your hamstring crosses over the knee, that fires up too. I can kind of grab onto that. Good. And if that's the interesting part, then you keep working with that. Or you can drop more weight over into your left hand, more weight into your right knee, roll your right knee down and see if your right foot will come up. And then you put it back down. In that same pocket spot, yeah, that's where the fire, right? But notice if to get it up, you lean and pick it up. See if you can stay wherever you've put yourself and turn on right at your pocket, right? And it might tremor some while it's up, and then you put it down, and then you lift, and you put it down. It's not meant to come up high, right? And you put it down. Last couple of times, up. For me on this side, my heel turns up, my toes turn down more to get it off the ground. And the two sides often look different. So I can turn my heel up as an aid and then pick it up. One last time. Good. And then you can take your sandbag away. Take a moment and lie down on your back. And place your hands right around your outer hips where that fire was being created at your TFL, tensor fascia lata. And just notice now that you're not doing anything, what you feel. So that was really turning on the outer side. I'm maybe not 100% going back and forth, but working outer, inner, and experiencing that. Give yourself one more moment here to feel what you feel. Good, and then bend your knees. You can roll to your side and come up. Find your block. And I'm going to lay something soft on this block because it's wood, just to pat it. So I'm draping something over it. You may or may not feel a need to do that, but I do want it to be a soft surface. And I'm going to lay on my right side. And I can even start off in kind of a 90-90 shape here, where my right shin is along the right edge of the mat. But then I'm going to put my left knee up on top of that soft surface. And I might have to move around and find the sweet spot because I want to feel like I've got some shin, some knee, and some upper leg against it. And at first, just pick up your left foot so it's floating, right? So then I can really feel connected with my left knee against the prop of the block and blanket. Take your left hand over to the same long edge so I can kind of look down and make sure that my right shoulder is over my right elbow. I'm going to press into my hands to really secure, press into my forearm so that's really locked in. And then I want you to feel by pressing into your arms now that you can also press your knee against the block. Right? So I'm pressing with my hand, pressing with my forearm, and also pressing with my left knee. And then once you do that, if you take your left hand, you can kind of feel inside your left thigh and feel some life. That might be the stopping point. Or you can press into your elbow and your hand, lift your right hip off the mat. And if that's a lot for your shoulder, you make sure you keep your left hand down. Or you can reach your left hand over and touch your inner thigh and feel what's happening, right? So whether your left hand is on the ground or not, you can now lift your right thigh, right shin off the mat. So now my inner left leg is really firing, right? So my right hip is off the ground. My right elbow is pressing. My left hand can jazz hands if I want, or I can use my left hand to stabilize, but you can really feel how your left leg is going, please put yourself down. Please put yourself down. Give yourself one more breath there, and then ease down, right? Give your left leg a little love there. And then you're going to go to your other side. So I'm just going to move that around so you can still see me. And when I go down to my side, my left shin is on the long edge. And I put my right knee, you can start with it on the floor if that was helpful to have this 90-90. And then my right knee is going to prop up on the block. Setting up your left shoulder underneath your left elbow. And then just being there, right? Feeling that. or you can press down so that your right knee is cushioned into the block and your right foot floats. So it kind of feels side planky in your body. It feels side bendy, so your left waist is longer, and you can hang out here. Or I can take my right hand over to that same edge. So I'm on my left elbow, I'm on my right hand, and I can really press into that space. So then I can add more pressure with my right leg against the block. And then I start to feel my inner right thigh turning on. And I can stay there. Or I can press in a little bit more and feel like I can begin to lift my left hip. So now my left knee is still on the ground, but my left hip is not. And I can stay there and press stronger into my left elbow, either with my right hand on the floor or off the floor. Now my left leg floats. So my right knee is on the padding, my elbow is on the ground, my left leg is floating, my inner right thigh is talking, right? You can wave with your right hand. You can also feel how everything's awake across your abdomen, right? Give yourself one more breath. And then ease on down. Sit yourself up. And go one more time to the other side, but the other side quite literally, right? So when I set up this time, I have to be a little bit further away. So rather than putting my left knee on the prop, I'm going to put my right ankle on the prop. Right ankle on the prop. I still want to keep some bend to my knee. I'm going to have my right shoulder over my right elbow again. Put your left foot flat to the floor. So even here, great place to be. Kind of feels like you're reclining in some sort of pose for a painter who's decided to paint you. Or you can press into your left foot and press into your right elbow to lift yourself up. So now my right hip is not on the ground. So I can stay there, or I can press more into my right elbow, and I can use my left hand on the mat to pick up my left foot. And if that's already like a heave and a ho and lots of sounds are happening, then keep it lower, right? But then if I take my left hand out of the picture, now my right hip on the outside is doing most of the work. So I can wave with my left hand. And then drop your fingers, drop your foot, soften, and lower your hip. Right? One last play of these on the other side. So when you come down to your left side, you're on your left elbow, pad your left ankle, drop your right sole. Good place to hang out, right? Because you're here, and just by virtue of your right knee being open, you're using your outer right hip flexors to keep your knee up. You're pressing down, you're activating some of the muscles in your side body. Awesome. So you can stay there. Or begin to press into your right foot, into your elbow on the ground to lift your hips. So if you touch your inner right thigh is doing some stuff there. I can use my right hand tented on the ground, so I've got more support now to press my left ankle into the block and lift my right foot. And I can stay like that. Or I can take my right hand and float it someplace. So now my outer left hip is the hip that's doing most of the work. They're both doing something, right? If it feels precarious, Patricia, keep your fingers on the floor. Good, and then drop your foot, lower your hip. Move the prop. Lie down on your back. Take a couple breaths in. That one's probably the most work-intensive thing that we'll do. Feel what you feel around your pelvis. Give yourself a couple more exhales. One more breath. Good. So we'll do one more that really feels like action, and then we'll start to add a little bit of stretch to it. So I'm going to come up onto all fours, and I'm going to pull this folding chair in, and I've already got a blanket up on it. And so when I do that, my all fours will be right here. So the chair is next to me. And I'm going to crawl to a place now, because my left side is toward the chair, where I can take my left knee up onto the chair. Okay? So that my left knee is padded, my right knee is still underneath my right hip. And if I look at my right thigh, I don't want to see my right thigh falling out or into my midline. So I can actually move my hands a little bit to the right. So I make a triangle between my two hands and my right knee. So I can create a really nice base for my right leg. And you can be right here, and this creates like a sort of stretching moment. Or you can have a little bit of that shortening on your outer left ankle and lift your left foot up a couple of inches. So when I lift my left foot up, it's just like what we were doing from a seated place, but I'm trying to keep everything else still. So there's this desire to kind of crane my head, lift my foot, and then that kicks my pelvis over toward the left. So it kind of feels like a sachet, right? But I want to keep everything as still as possible and lift my left foot. It's just a little bit. So there's that internal rotation of my left femur bone. It puts action on both sides of my hip. Because added pressure down into the block, I can feel my inner hip flexors working. Because my foot's coming up, I can feel the outer muscles working too. So you get to do both sides. Last couple times with that. Good. And then more weight into your right hand so you can bring your left knee down. Be on all fours just for a moment and notice the distinct difference between your left hip and your right hip. And then you can turn around. You could also move the thing if it's movable, but I think it's nicer to move around. Set yourself up so you're again next to whatever you're using if you're using. So this could also be, if you're not using anything, you could just hold your leg up in space. It's a lot more work to hold your leg up in space, but you could, like a fire hydrant kind of moment, hold your leg up in space off to the side. Or if you're propping, you can prop your right knee now, form that triangle between your two hands and your left knee. And being here with it floating on or being supported, you just get a little bit of length through your inner thigh. And then if you're adding the movement, you press into the chair, you press into the thing, and you lift your right foot up a little bit. So the pressure down, there's your inner hip working. The lift up, there's your outer hip working. And it's not about how high, and it's definitely not about fast, right? Because you want to feel, you want to experience, right? You want to experience the whole thing. If you're moving quickly and sort of swinging through it, it might feel like you're achieving range of motion, but you kind of miss out on all the good parts. It's like skimming through a book or reading the cliff notes. You miss out on the subtlety. Sometimes we want to miss out on the subtlety in the body, but that doesn't really serve us. Last couple times. Good. And then ease down, be on all fours, and just feel the distinct difference. Maybe they feel more balanced now. Maybe they feel less balanced now. Give yourself a breath more. Sweet. Good. And then if there's a blanket on top of your piece of furniture, and I'll talk about the not furniture version as well, but I'm going to place the chair that I'm using on the mat, and then I'm going to place some knee padding on the floor right in front of it, right? So I'm going to use the chair as a place for my foot. So when I stand up, and then brace myself on the chair and step my right foot up onto the chair. And so this is a great place to be, kind of in a little forward bend, kind of feeling with my right foot up on the piece of furniture, my hand somewhere on that piece of furniture. It feels like a lunge, right? Should feel like a lunge. And if you just thought like, how am I going to get my foot up on that thing might be too high, right? And then give yourself a moment here, and then think about where your right foot is on that thing, and you want to move it toward what is a corner or the side, and your opposite hand balances that. Because of where I've placed myself, I can now start to bend my left knee, and sometimes you have to widget your toes backwards some, and think about lowering my left knee onto that soft padding that's underneath my hip. So now I've got my left knee down, my right foot up. So there's a much deeper action in the bend of your right knee, and you're getting a lot of length potential through your left thigh. So if that is more than you want or need, you can always keep your knee up, keep the simplicity of the lunge. You could also lunge with your knee on the ground and your foot on the ground. So once I'm here, I just want to feel vertical. And then I'm paying attention to what my right knee is doing. If it's winging way out to the right or trying to cross into the midline, I'm going to find a place where it feels vertical. So I can use the chair, upright my spine. Feel the front of my left hip, the front of my left thigh, getting some space. Notice some action in my left glutes, but not trying to squeeze or anything there. And then the final potential thing here is to put your left forearm, you can start with your left palm on the piece of furniture, and then see if your left elbow will drop. And then that made my right knee want to wing out, so I've got to hug it back in. And then from there, I'm going to add my right arm into the sky for a twist. So I'm not trying to push my pelvis to the chair. I want to keep my pelvis feeling like it's over the top of my knee. And then I'll place my hand on the back of the chair or something stable, my hand on a corner, press down to lift my knee, hand on the chair, step down. And then just be here for a moment so I can kind of march in place. Let your hips move. And then I'm going to bring my left foot up onto this piece of furniture, your chair, whatever you're using. My hand can go to the back if there's a back. And then you can be here in this lunge feeling. You can have both hands on the seat if that's where you're working. So you have this lunge from a different angle. And then if you're going on with that, you can use your left hand on the back of your chair, your right hand on the front corner, and then ease your right knee down so it goes right under your hip. Sometimes I can use my left hand here to frame my left knee to keep it from winging out, and my right hand can be up on the back of the chair. And I get a lot of feedback in the front of my right thigh in this moment, right? Front of my right hip. A lot of length. And I can feel that there's a tendency that I might want to just push some through my right toes and turn on my right butt muscle. And then, yeah, I feel like I get more stretch in my right hip, but I don't really need that stretch in my right hip right now. It just feels like extra. So you can stay here, or you can begin to place your right hand down on the surface of the seat. And maybe that turns into dropping your right elbow down. And then your left hand can stay on your left knee as you rotate, or you can take your left hand up to the sky, taking your twist. Work where you are, not where you would like to be. You know, that seems like, well, why, right? But you can be where you are and you can expand in that place. If you go beyond where you are, that's when you fall off the chair. And then take the twist away. Come back to the vertical spine, both hands on the seat surface, press down, and step down. And then just a little march in place there. Good, and then you can drop both knees down onto the soft surface. And I'm going to add a blanket across this chair here in a way that doesn't fall off. So the last thing is a pigeon. And so you can think, okay, I'm going to do pigeon on the floor, and that is pigeon. Awesome. Or I can use this setup of padding, change things a little bit, and pick up my knees. And then rather than my right foot coming to where my right is, I'm going to move my right foot over to where my left hand is. And I'm going to make sure that the blanket doesn't move. And I'm going to ease my shin onto the seat surface. So my shin is there. And then I can use the back of the chair and the seat of the chair to lower my left knee down onto the soft surface. So same idea, my left hip can come right behind my right heel, and I can have my left toes pointed or curled behind me. So I have this more vertical quality through pigeon. And then if you have a back of the chair, you can walk your arms onto the back of the chair and hold your opposite elbows. And let your head get heavy to your forearms. If there's no back, you can take your forearms onto the seat surface and just let your head fall. It's nice with the back too, because then I can rest my head and drop my arms a little bit lower. But you could also do pigeon on the floor or figure four on your back. Notice here how your right hip might want to swing to the left. And that that's happening when your left hip feels like it's leaning into the chair. Pull your left hip away from the chair a little bit so that your right hip still feels like it's getting some dynamic opening. And that should change the experience, right? Good. And then slowly, both hands on the seat surface. So you can press down the front of the seat to lift. And have both feet on the floor for a moment. You can do a little knee bending, hip side to side. And then it's going to be your left ankle. So you can use your left hand, sometimes maybe on the non-slidey surface. Place your left ankle. Drop into your left knee and shin. And then ease down your right knee. You can imagine doing this in your kitchen and putting your shin up onto the kitchen counter, right? And then you can stay vertical. And you might notice the two sides are pretty different, right? You can always build up the level of softness underneath the knee that's on the ground, so the ground isn't as far away. So you can stay nice and vertical here, or you can start to hinge, even just holding the back of whatever you're using and letting your elbows soften. Notice your right hip wanting to push to the chair. Keep it away from that. And then you might drop your forearms onto the seat or across the back of the chair to bow. Right, so don't try to press your knee down in this moment, Keith. Just let it be where it is. And then think about the corners of your pelvis. So rather than trying to press your thigh down, feel like you can move your pelvis almost side to side but roll your right hip forward and then try to roll your left hip forward. So there's this communication between the outer edges of your hip rather than stressing out your knee in any way. Go one last moment. Good. And then use the seat surface with your hands. Make sure your right toes are curled. Press up. Both feet down, and then you can waddle your hips. And then you're making your way down to the ground. And I'm just going to leave the chair where it is and have the blanket that was supporting my knees now go underneath my hips. And then I'm going to put my legs up on the chair. So you could do this with your legs up a wall if you prefer that. You could slip your legs onto a chair. So you have this quality of Viparita Karani. Support. It's nice if you're using the chair to make sure that your knee creases meet the chair surface, so there's a real sense of support for your whole lower leg. Your arms can lay out. Maybe your hands rest on your body. Let your breath become shallow. And your skull heavy. Sarvamangalam Mangalye Shive Sarvartha Sadike Sharanye Trayambake Gauri Narayani Namostute. Narayani, 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 Narayani Namostute. Sarvam Mangalam Mangalye Shive Sarvartha Sadike Sharanye Trayambake Gauri Narayani Namostute Narayani Namostute Narayani Namostute. Start to breathe deeply again. Can move about a little bit. Your head can turn side to side. Start to roll onto your side, easing off the furniture or just rolling. You can come up to sit. Bring your hands into your heart or rest them somewhere on your body. Breathe in. We are one life, we are one light, and we are one love. It's with gratitude that I bow, honoring the divine in each of you. Peace be with you and blessings upon you. Thanks for showing up. Thanks for tuning in.